Section 4 of Chapter 3. We will be discussing how does government help the poor, providing a safety net. Now before you begin this lecture in Section 4, you should have already watched a video that showed pictures and a video about construction workers who used to build the skyscrapers and what was all included in that and how unsafe it was to be one of these workers at that time. Now, the question is asked when you watch those videos, how careful would you be if you did not have a safety net underneath you? And then in comparison to that question, how cautious would you be if you did have a safety net? Well, if we did it by percentage wise, we would say probably that without a safety net, we'd probably be 100% cautious. And maybe with a safety net, well, we wouldn't be as cautious because we know if we fall, it would still be terrifying, but at least we'd have something there to stop us from actually being hurt or even killed. Now, it was actually interesting when they started passing, when vehicles actually started getting seatbelts in their cars, everyone thought that the reduction of deaths would go down in automobile accidents. Well, it was actually quite the opposite because we found that actually we saw an increase in the amount of car crashes. And the reason behind that was because safety seatbelts were considered a safety net, and people had the mentality that, oh, I'm going to be more safe, and as a result of that, we would be able to drive more recklessly. But what actually happened was that we saw an increase in deaths because people relied so much on that. So I show you those videos to demonstrate this whole idea of having something in place that could protect something from failing. We tend to be less cautious, or we're not as smart as our decision making when it comes to resources. So we want to talk about some safety nets that are a part of the federal government that is offered today. So first off is we have a problem in the U.S. and it's poverty. We actually have a line, I guess a line in the sand, you could call it that, of a poverty threshold, where people that are anyone below this line, on the line or below, are considered living in poverty. In 2014, one individual who made $11,670 or less was considered in the poverty range. A family of four was considered poverty if they made $23,850 or less. Now, living in a free market system in the United States, you are going to have these gaps between poverty and the rich. We do not have an evenly wealth distribution market, and we shouldn't, because we should want competition and have different levels there. But not everyone is going to get the same amount back, and as a result of that, you will have poverty that exists. So as a result of this, we do have a poverty threshold. So the government tries to come along and find ways to help those who live in poverty. So I did the math on this for $11,670. If someone was to make $9.50 an hour at 40 hours a week at 52 weeks in a year, they'd be at $19,760. So $11,670 poverty threshold would actually be only 24 hours a week. So a couple questions behind that is, well, first off, is it the issue of the worker not putting in the work ethic, or is it a problem of there's not enough work hours available to these people to be able to support themselves? So the government's role, trying to take care of the following people: very young, old, sick, poor, and disabled. And we have government programs on the federal, state, and local governments to help these types of groups of people that are there. Now, a question is to be asked: if we were to take a survey in the class right now, what would we say would be the most important type of this people group that would need the most support? Would you say the young, the old, sick, poor, or disabled? Which one would you say would be the most important in your mind? Now that you have picked out a group, share with that someone next to you and say that this is be the type of people group that you would pick, and explain why. Why do you think that would be the most important people group for this? Now, if we were to flip that question around, which people group would we say that if we had to cut funding completely for one of these, what people group would you cut? Now that you have an answer behind that, share with someone next to you on what people group you would cut out and your explanation why. Whenever I do this survey, it's always mixed results. Everyone has different opinions. And this is why it's so hard for the government to be able to cut any programs, because we do all have friends and loved ones and people that we know that need this type of support. So it's very difficult to decide on what people group or category of people we should actually cut funding. So let's talk a little more in depth about what is the welfare system. Well, it's nothing more than government aid to the poor. That's all it is. That's providing funds and opportunities and programs to aid the poor. It's redistribution of wealth for some people to others. For those who are very wealthy or the middle class, it's taking tax money that they are being taxed and given to the less fortunate. FDR, when he came into office during the Great Depression, he tried to turn things around and get us out of poverty. And so he passed a lot of things, a lot of welfare system programs that we still have today. LBJ declared war on poverty. He said within 50 to 100 years, poverty will not exist in the United States. To this day, we still have poverty. And we're looking at the idea of not having it all together is very difficult. When it comes to that, 1996, we actually had a huge reform that was done on the welfare system to try to eliminate all this waste that was going on in improper types of funds. So what we have today is we still have poverty, so a welfare system is still needed for this. There's actually interesting statistics on that war on poverty. Since LBJ launched this program, we've spent over $22 trillion on this program to be able to eliminate poverty, and we still have it today. So the question of, is it pouring more money into the system to try to fix it, or we need different programs, or what exactly is not working? When you talk about welfare with people groups, they usually have one or two of these opinions. One, it's providing an opportunity to get people above water. Of other personality, they think that you're demonstrating more while they're sinking how to swim. Now, what's the right approach? Well, obviously we spent $22 trillion on it, so it's very difficult to say what's working and what's not when it comes to the welfare system. So let's talk about some different programs that are out there. First, we have cash transfers. This is direct payment of money by the government to poor, disabled, and retired people. This means giving cash funds directly to people who are in need. So what we find here is budgeted items, budgets of money are set aside to give cash directly from the government to the poor, disabled, and retired. Now, as we mentioned here, a program in 1996 was launched to try to cut back on wasteful spending in the poverty system. This was known as TANF, and the whole idea is that we need to start getting people off the welfare programs and back to work. So we need incentives. We need to establish a lifetime for benefits. Let's get these people off instead of having this cycle of poverty that continues to exist and exist and exist. The objective, let's move people off the welfare system. So a lot of programs came out of this in 1996, such as offering more tuition assistance for students that lived in poverty to be able to go to college. And the idea behind that is that then more students would attend college, and then they wouldn't be living in poverty because they'd have a better job. So efforts have been demonstrated in trying to crack down on the poverty system, but at the same time, it's not getting the results as quickly as we'd like it to be. So this was the name of that program, TANF. Another program that we have today is Social Security. Established in 1935, so FDR was kind of the brains behind this. And the whole idea is this program is set up to help those who retire and provide some sort of income that they can use to help them retire, to help offset some of the costs or fight against inflation that is out there. So when you get a job, or if you're currently working, when you get your pay stub, you'll notice that a small percent is being taken out, and it's known as Social Security tax. And the idea behind this is that the money taken from your checks can be given to the older and the elderly. And the idea behind it was great, but the problem is we're having more and more people that are in need of Social Security, and we're not having enough workers to be able to help and assist people that really do need this type of funding. There's an interesting statistic that we look at in personal finance. We look at is it possible to actually retire at age 65 and able to do that. There's a graph in there that demonstrates if a young person from ages 19 to 26, 8 years, would put $2,000 away each year for those times and put it into accounts where they range for, let's say it's 12% interest rate. By the time they hit age 65, that $2,000 they put away for 8 years, so that's $16,000, would end up being $2.288 million. So this whole idea that people are not able to retire at age 65, it's not that they can't, it's just a lack of discipline and saving early in life. If you think, $2,000, that's quite a bit, especially during years of college. Well, I broke it down even smaller into that. It's $167 a month. It's $5.57 a day to be able to support this. If you went into an hour, it's 23 cents an hour. And doing that for 8 years, I mean, it is totally doable. And that's not giving one penny more after age 26. So Social Security, by the time your age gets to age 65, you will not be receiving the same amount that they're receiving today. It'll probably be a smaller percentage, or it may not exist at all when it comes to this. But the purpose of it is disabled, widow spouses, orphan children. Now, we have something called unemployment insurance. The purpose of this is to help someone who has lost their job and be able to find, it provides income until these individuals are able to find work again. So who's eligible? Well, that is anyone who has lost their job. Who pays for it? That's the employer. And you have to prove that you're searching for work. The average amount of time for unemployment rate is about 26 weeks, but the federal government does have the ability to do this. President Obama, during his administration, he actually extended unemployment insurance during the recession because he felt it was necessary to be able to provide this funding for people who needed it. So the amount that you actually get on unemployment insurance, from my understanding, is 60% of what you make. So if you've been making six figures, $100,000 for quite a while, and you lose your job, well, 60% of that would be $60,000 a year. But 26 weeks, that gives you about 6 months to be able to find and transition. So the whole idea is that you'd be able to find something within that 6 months. Workers' compensation is another program, insurance program for workers injured or disabled on the job. This is required by every firm. Now, there is some loopholes when it comes to workers' compensation, but for the most part, every business has to have workers' compensation. So while you're if you're an employee at New Life Academy and you fell down the stairs, broke your leg, that would be considered workers' compensation. I do have a story about workers' compensation and a foolish decision I did that actually I should have gone to the doctor for, but I can share that another time if I remember or if someone reminds me to ask about this workers' compensation. But again, the purpose of it is an insurance program if you get hurt at work that your medical bills are covered through your work. We have another type of benefit known as an in-kind benefit. This is goods and services provided for free at greatly reduced prices. So if you've ever been to a grocery store and you notice that sometimes they have stickers or on some of the products, it's called WIC. Now, WIC is a program for women, infants, and children to provide them nutrition, food, milk, all those things. It's helping people out who may not necessarily be able to afford the nutrition that the children and women would need. So, an in-kind benefit would mean that they would get these products at a cheaper price, or as a result of this, they would have some sort of coupons or something to provide for this. So it's a great way to help people out. Energy assistance. If someone is unable to pay their heating bill in Minnesota in January, they're actually required by law that they cannot cut someone off for not paying their bill. But there is energy assistance programs out there to help these high utility bills in the wintertime for people that are on this lower pay scale. Another program is the food stamp program. The purpose of this program is to help people be able to purchase food. And it's known as an EBT card. Oftentimes you'll see at certain gas stations EBT accepted here, or grocery stores, or sometimes even restaurants are starting to move towards having some of these benefits as well. EBT card, though, has gone up after a lot of scrutiny has happened with these cards because they're finding in certain states that the EBT card is actually being used for cigarettes, alcohol, and fast food, which is none of those are beneficial to the individual. Since 2015 in Minnesota, you cannot purchase alcohol or cigarettes for this, but lottery tickets, gambling, adult venues are okay, unless things have changed since 2015. But a lot of people take advantage of this card. What they were doing a study on this card is they were finding that a lot of people are taking out cash using this card. And so they dug a little further and they were finding that a lot of people are actually at casinos taking out cash there. Now we can kind of assume that they weren't taking the cash out and going to the grocery store. So a lot of abuse has gone on with this program, but it does provide a food stamp program for those who are in need of food. We have subsidized housing. Subsidized housing helps someone who cannot fully afford to provide their rent. So the idea behind this is that if, let's say someone's rent is $1,500 and they only make enough to provide $800. What we find with this is that the federal government will then provide the remaining balance. So that $700 that they still need to be able to provide for their rent, they would now have that money. Here's the problem though with this program is that if I know I'm working a job, I'm working very hard, and that the government is going to supplement or provide the rest of the money that I am making to pay for my rent, there's no real incentive there for me to work any higher because let's say I'm bringing $800 a month for rent. Well, now let's say I can now do $1,200. Well, that means now I'm paying more for my rent, and now the government would only be paying $300 to get us to the $1,500. So you can see with this program that, well, why should I work harder if I'm going to bring the same amount of money home? So there's not a lot of incentive. Now, it does provide housing for those who are poor, who are in need assistance to live somewhere. That is the purpose of it. But there is some disadvantages to it. Legal aid. Legal advice given at no charge. Now, when you are arrested, if you are ever arrested, hopefully you never will be or never have been, an officer will read you your rights, and the rights will say to the fact that you have a right to a lawyer. If you cannot be afforded one, the state or whoever will provide one for you. This is legal aid. This is a safety net that is there to assist people that are guilty or arrested or whatever they might be. And the purpose of it is to give advice to this person who has supposedly done wrong. You're considered innocent until proven guilty. These are known as, if you know what rights those would be, we'd call them the Miranda rights. Now, also legal advice is there to help at contracts, business matters, public defenders. I mean, this is all there. If you ever plan to be a lawyer one day, you can be a prosecuting attorney, or you can be a public defender. If you're looking at money-wise, you probably want to be a prosecuting attorney. Public defenders usually the ones that are helping those who are lower income, who need advice for free. But legal aid is something that is there too. Let's talk about some medical benefits in these safety nets. Covers Americans over 65 and disabled people as Medicare. Medicaid covers some unemployment or those not covered by employers' insurance programs. We have a program designated for children if they're unable to get insurance. It is known as SHIP, and it helps 6.5 million children covered. And looking at that, it's pretty hard to disagree with, well, providing income for the children, well, those for the over 65. Here's the problem, though, that we're finding with these medical benefits is that if you also look on your paychecks, I think it's 2.9% of your paycheck is being taken out and being designated to this program to help pay for the Medicare. The problem is, and I don't know if necessarily it's a problem, but it's something that needs to be dealt with, is that that's not necessarily the word I want to use either, but people are living longer, which is a good thing, but as you age and get older and older, things are more expensive. Medical equipment's more expensive. So Medicare is going to continue to increase. So the problem is, what do we do and how do we pay for that safety net? As soon as you turn age 65, you go on Medicare because no insurance company wants to take you because you're too much of a risk. But medical benefits are there as well. Education. Funding of programs for preschool to college. This is public school education. Funding education for children with learning disabilities. So students that have a learning disability, they have opportunities just as those who do not to be able to attend a public school, and teachers and assistants are all provided for that. Funding the programs for preschool to college. We had a candidate who was running in 2016 for the Democratic Party named Bernie Sanders. He had a vision that he wanted to make public universities free, and being able to provide that opportunity for students to be able to go to the next level. President Obama had a program where he wanted to provide preschool and more, even before that, early stages, to be able to provide free daycare to assist with the cost when it comes to that. So just more safety nets to help these people out that are in these situations. So education, there's quite a few of these safety nets. Now, with all those government programs, there's some good that comes to that. But where we find the most good being done is not actually even a government program, it's private action. This is where we allow citizens, taxpayers, employees, employers to decide where are they going to allow their tax dollars to go. So a lot of tax deductions have been created to individuals and corporations if they have charitable donations. So every time you make a charitable donation to your church through tithe or whatever it might be, you can actually write that off at tax time. Now it's not going to be very much, but at least you get some sort of benefit for you. About 10 years ago, in 2006, we almost had nearly $300 million given in charitable donations. The government can offer grants, financial award to a private individual or group to carry on a specific task. So maybe it's creating a program that feeds and takes care of the homeless. Well, you could apply a grant for that. That could provide for those things. When people are more motivated by heart than rather by money, we see a lot more things get done. And that's why it's important for the private sector to get involved with charitable donations, to decide what they think is important and what's not important. Because if you get to choose, a lot of your decision making is based on your mind and your heart. So if we see that, well, then people are more willing to provide more donations. Same thing with the school here when it comes to donations and people giving money to the school. They want to be a part of something bigger. They want to give back to something they believe in. And that's where taxes don't give that opportunity to allow people to give to something that they believe in. So allowing these opportunities, the private sector to get more involved with giving more donations, we actually would probably see more growth when it comes to that. So this is the end of Chapter 3, Section 4. We covered all about Safety Net and the different programs that exist that are out there. If you have any questions, please let me know.